Hello there. Welcome to Dozy Studio ASMR. My name is Jessica. Today, I want to try something a bit different than I'm used to. I want to share a tutorial on how to draw a short-haired cat. I'll be drawing on gray-toned paper. I'll be using white and regular charcoal pencils and pressed charcoal, graphite pencils, and white gel pens. I have dry brushes for blending, a Tombow mono eraser, an X-Acto knife to sharpen the edge of the eraser, a regular eraser, a sharpener, 2 extra pieces of copy paper, 1 for charcoal and 1 for protecting the drawing, a ruler, and my reference photo. Now, in this tutorial, I'll show you how I stay motivated, my strategy, and how I manage mistakes. There's bound to be a lot of them, but it's how you work with them that makes or breaks a piece. I hope I can bridge that gap some of you artists are looking for between skill levels. I hope to make this tutorial easy to follow and digest. Now, let's get started and draw this cat. So I'm going to start with the outline of the drawing. I'm choosing a pencil in the middle, particularly the F pencil, to do the outline. I used to pick harder leads, 2H or above, because they would make very light lines for my outline. I've heard also some people choosing a softer lead for their outlines due to, some say it's easier to erase because there's less pressure that you need to put on a softer lead to make a mark. But I like to be right in the middle. The brand of pencils I'm using are Staedtler Mars Lumograph pencils. I've thought a lot about if the brand of graphite pencil matters, since I've often used more affordable brands of graphite pencils, and although the cheaper ones have been just fine for me, using these pencils, I can tell a big difference. They write smoother. They seem very sturdy. In my experience, if there's a will, there's a way. You can use a number 2 pencil and copy paper, really anything, to make art. I used to, as a kid, just use number 2 pencil, copy paper, and I blended with my finger, and I was still making decent art. If you want more workability and a little bit more quality, it's worth it to go for a more expensive pencil. So, does it matter somewhat? But just work with what you can. Right now, I'm finding the middle of the photograph mainly the cat in the photograph. I'm not going to be drawing the background at all. So I found the middle with my ruler, and then I'm going to place it on the paper. My outline is going to be mostly freehand. So once I get the middle of the paper with my ruler and I mark that down, I'm going to build from the closest shape I can find to that middle and start with that shape. And in this case, the white chest is pretty close to the middle, so I'm going to start with that shape. And as I make that shape, just somewhat triangular, but it's quite a strange triangle, I will build off of that and find the next shape closest to the chest. Some parts of the outline are lines that mark particular features. This could be a change in fur direction or a significant shade change. And as I'm mapping these features as well, it will make it easier to transition later. I can reference my photo and see exactly what I was trying to do there. As you can see, I outline with little strokes. This is my preference due to I don't have a very steady hand. I shake. So it gives me more of a easier outline, and it's easier for me to see. For example, eyeing the proportions is easier when built off. So let's say I have the chest shape a certain size. I can work off of the next line or lines or curves and kind of sense out the proportions. Doing this slowly helps me see the bigger picture. I do highly recommend, if you struggle with this type of outline structure, working this way, using the ruler to find the proportions, or a really easy way to make the paper just easier to manage is the grid method. The grid method breaks down the image into smaller sections, and you can adjust the square sizes, bigger or smaller, compared to your reference photo. And just as long as the same amount of squares is on the paper as is in your reference photo, then all you do with it is match each shape within each square. So I prefer getting a picture down, then doing edits if needed. I don't know if this is necessarily the reason why, but I have aphantasia, meaning I can't see a picture in my head. So once my eyes leave the reference photo, it's basically just what I remember conceptually of the picture. Also, getting a picture or the drawing down helps with my motivation. Unfortunately, this is kind of risky because once you put your pencil, lead, or charcoal down, you may be able to erase it, but it will start to settle in. However, I like to think most drawings are adjustable. Even if you need to alter how it looks a little bit for you to like it more, it may be worth it if you can get away with it. Also, once I get something down, it's easier for me to see how to improve the likeness in comparison to the photograph. My way of drawing is somewhat chaotic, but there's a method to my madness. Because of this, the paper I lay my hand on to protect the drawing from oil on my hands allows me to go over the drawing without smearing it, so I can go back to other sections that I've already done. For the fur of the face, I'm going to add a base layer that's just blended charcoal. I'm going to add different shadows depending on the reference photo. And I'll add this charcoal by using the extra piece of paper that I have. Not the one to protect the drawing, but the other paper. Writing some pressed charcoal onto that paper, just scribbling on it. And then I'm going to dip my dry brush into those marks and blend it onto the paper. And in order to find out where the shadows and the highlights lie, I'll go to my reference photo and see where the light source hits the cat, which is on the left side of his face. So it's coming from the left side of the cat. That's where the brightest part of his face is. But also, his fur is not only different shadows and highlights, but different colors. There's white, and it goes all the way to a dark gray. Whether it's in the lighted portion or the darker portion. So having a keen eye and checking where it's darkest, where it's lightest, in between all of those colors. And how I'm going to add texture is just little dots to get the flecks in the fur. And then I'll blend them out so they aren't as harsh. The darkest shade I'm using for now is a hard charcoal. So it's not as dark as a softer charcoal. But later I will add more contrast. The brand of charcoal I'm using is Winsor & Newton. Now this paper has a smooth texture, which is great for blending. However, the more texture the paper has, the more contrast it can have. The contrast is still buildable, especially with charcoal on this type of paper, but graphite has less texture to work with. So once you put a layer of graphite on this type of paper, it gets shiny and it's hard to build on top of that. Another benefit to this type of paper is it erases better. Now, something about my process is that I like to bring the drawing to life. Bringing the drawing to life early helps me with my motivation, and it helps me perceive the proportions easier. So, the best way I know how to bring a drawing to life is to add details to the eyes. To do this, we add shadows and highlights. Eyes are not always a bright color. In this case, my cat has yellow eyes, but if you look at the photo itself, you can see there's a lot of shadows in the eye. So it's not even a bright yellow. It's a mustard, or even there's darker tones than that in there. And to add to the shine of the eye, I either use a paint, or in this case I'm using gel pen to make that shine really pop. Gel pen is more difficult to edit since it has it lays on the paper differently than graphite and charcoal. It's not erasable. However, it's not impossible to edit. You can cover it with your other pencils. Just keep in mind that graphite may make it just like really shiny, but adjusting it with charcoal is possible. The brand of gel pen I have is JustArt, JUSART. It's pretty affordable, supposedly non-yellowing, which is what I was looking for. A lot of gel pens tend to yellow over time. So hopefully these pens do what I hope they do and stay white. Gel pen will sit on top of graphite and charcoal and make a bright highlight. The three main highlighting techniques I'm using are erasing, white charcoal, and gel pen. The Tombow mono eraser creates great lowlights, but can also erase small sections of the drawing. After blending the bottom layer, I'll start to add the texture. The texture is just dots over top of the blended sections. This will create the flecks that are in his fur, and then I'll blend them out. I also added white charcoal to sections of the face. By curving the white charcoal lines in different directions, I made the white sections look more fluffy. blending all these details into the face, I'm starting to notice a difference in the reference photo and my drawing. The eyes and snout especially are elongated compared to the reference. The cat looks more like a big cat, like a tiger, than a cat. So at the end, I'll try to do some editing. And don't forget to add the whisker dots and other details in the fur. This is because I'll be doing the whiskers last, and the whiskers will lay on top of everything else. The mid-body section will go comparatively faster than the face due to how the fur appears. There's more surface area to the fur than in the face. So this will be similar to the base layer of the face with more contrast, and you'll see more strands of fur. The fur of the body flares in different directions, so letting the wrist flow in the directions of the reference photo will give an illusion of fluffy, curved fur on the paper. Just make sure to leave space in between the sections of fur. So don't be afraid to let a strand just be a strand. Doing too many strands can make it look just like a block of that color. Since this is a short-haired cat, the fur length I'm going for is about 1/2 inch for these proportions. After placing a section, I will do another 1/2 inch section directly below and blend them with the dry brush. Depending on the size of your drawing, just adjust for the length of the fur. It may not be 1/2 inch like mine. And to do this roughly, you can use your fingers to measure how long the fur is, and use it in comparison to a different section of your drawing that you've already set in place to find how long that fur needs to be. You can also look at your reference photo and see where the fur is more separated, where you can see the individual strands, and where it's more of a smooth texture. There are both in this reference photo. In the front of the body, there are more separate strands, and towards the back, by the back legs, it's more blended, more shiny. Keep in mind, I'm doing the shadows at the same time as the color. So the white chest shows contrast in white levels. You can see bright whites, and then even like a lighter off-white than the gray-toned paper. So once I place the strands of fur with the white charcoal, afterwards I'll use the dry brush. I won't need to dip or smear into the charcoal too much because there's already pigment on the brush itself and should be enough to darken some of the white, and it'll add depth to the chest. To make the parts of the fur look shiny, I'll need to use the Tombow Mono Eraser to add lowlights into the fur. So I'll erase in between the darkest contrasts of the fur, and I'm doing it in a slight zigzaggy pattern. And then I'll blend it with the dry brush to buff out the sharp edges of the low light of that erased portion. Now I have the mid-body mostly done, but I'll finish it more when I get more of an idea of what the lower body looks like. So what I've noticed is the lower body is actually not proportional in the drawing, so I'm adjusting it. In the picture, the lower body is slightly less than the mid body, and currently the lower body is an equal ratio to the mid body. So I'm going to shorten it just a little bit, measuring it with my fingers, and I'm using the top of the legs as a marking place to adjust it. It's the easiest part of the picture I could find to measure that ratio. After I adjust the lower body outline upwards, the feet, and the rest of the body, I can erase the larger outline. The lower body is similar to the mid body, as it is mostly sleek and shiny, but the front of the low body and the legs have some texture to it. Then there are the white feet, which is somewhat similar to the chest, except the fur is not as long. But similarly to it, there are different levels of white, and there are also the claws that I'll need to outline. So far, I've planned to make the darkest shade the hard charcoal, but I'm deciding I'm probably going to do some more contrast, so I'm going to use the soft charcoal in the edits section. In the front of the low body, there are some color differences, some lighter shades of strands of fur, so I'm going to add some soft white charcoal lines to add some texture. So here's an example of me struggling to place the charcoal over the graphite pencil that's already been placed. And I've managed to be able to put some white in between those strands of fur that are made with graphite by using the side of my pencil. When I think I'm done with a drawing, I'm not. I take at least a day to rest my eyes and come back to see if there's anything that needs to be adjusted. So let's take a deep breath and come back. After a decent amount of time to rest my eyes, I come back. assess not only what needs to be adjusted, but can be adjusted. I believe I can adjust the face. The eyes and snout are too long, making the head look too big. But it's really not the head, I don't think. I think it's just mainly the features of the face are making it look bigger than it actually is. I can bring the eyes in more on the sides, but I have to keep in mind this will potentially mess up the set pupils, and they already need to be adjusted anyway, because I've started the drawing with them kind of looking to the side, but looking at the reference photo, he's actually looking straight at me. So once I bring in the eyes, it'll make the dark lines around the eyes wider. So I'll need to erase it. And I'm going to use the Tombow Mono Eraser to make very tiny erasing marks. I'll also need to move the nose up. Luckily, in both the eyes and the snout, the levels are slightly darker than the paper, so if the erased sections end up darker, they should be easier to blend into the drawing. So, as I move the nose up, I'm going to adjust where the mouth lies. And to make it a little easier for me, I'm going to use the pencil to make marks all the way around, even though in the picture the cat does not have a line around the mouth. I'm going to put it there anyways, just to kind of give a guideline, and then I can erase it. And since I'm moving the mouth up, the chin is also going to set in a different part of the drawing. So I'm using the white charcoal pencil to adjust that chin. Now, because the chin is moved up, we have more room around the neck. So I'm adding some fur around that to give more depth. There will be more white fur added later. Because I moved the mouth, I'm adjusting the whisker dots on his face. Now I'm going to come in with the soft charcoal and add more contrast to the drawing. With a keen eye, I need to identify the darkest parts of the photo. So this would be the pupils around the eyes, the top of the ears, not the tip of the ears, but right by where the ear opens up. If you notice, it's already darker, but I'm going to make it even darker. There are stripes that need to be darkened, as well as the nose. Stripes along his face, along his body, and there's a section under his belly, right at the front of his belly, that I have not yet put a darker tone, and it almost looks like a pudge. Adding that darkness there gives it a little more depth, so the pudginess looks more like it's folding in and less like it's jutting out. Getting some of the dark shadows on the left side of the body where there's less light, and some of the stripes on his legs. What I can tell right now is there's a lot on the face that needs done, but especially on the back, by his back leg. That will need to be quite a few levels darker. And I'll do that by, of course, using the charcoal pencil, but also my dry brush. This section is a lot more shiny and less texturized, so using the dry brush is beneficial in this section. Here's where it gets super messy. So I'm attempting to draw the whiskers with white charcoal, but it's not working very well. And I'm going to try my hardest to get it on the paper, but with the graphite and how smooth the paper is, there's just not enough buildable area surface for me to use this charcoal. But this is fixable. After I put all the lines down and I notice it doesn't look how I'm wanting it to, I'm going to use some darker levels and blend over that white charcoal. My initial plan was to use charcoal on the left because the whiskers aren't as bright, and then use gel pen on the right. But since that didn't work out, I'm going to use gel pen on both sides. But first I need to put these whiskers down on the right side of the paper. The right side, I'm just going to keep the level of white that it's at. And for the left side, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to lay down the lines, and they'll be just as white as the right side, but I'm going to, after it's dry, blend the dry brush on top of it to make it a little bit darker than the right side. And this is pretty lucky that in the reference photo, the whiskers don't go outside of the body, so he can get away with this. But perhaps even if the whiskers fell outside of the body, maybe using the white charcoal could work just outside of the body, and the rest could be gel pen. But that's for another time. As I start placing the whiskers on the left side, I'm actually placing them a little bit silly, because I'm moving with my right hand from the right to the left, and I can't see very well with the whiskers, but the reason why I'm trying to do that is it gives me a similar curve. My hand curves similarly to the other side that I've already done by doing it this way. However, going from left to right, if you're right-handed, may be easier because you can see the line. So I'm doing a little bit of that. And then it's time to blend over the top of the whiskers, make them a little bit darker. It'll give the drawing more depth. So my brain thinks I'm done, and that's why I'm doing my signature. But I still have some work to do. I feel the signature is really important, and I like to put them on the front of my drawings and paintings. Some people put them on the back, some people put them on the front and the back. I just put my initials on the front. But I believe the signature is like your brand. It's like how you want to be remembered, or it's important to the drawing. Then you can watch me struggle to put the highlight in his eye. I had it way too close to the center of the pupil, so I just kept inching a little bit more and made it a little bit bigger. For me, no big deal. I think it looks okay. Something I'm noticing this drawing needs is more shadows on his face where there's no light source or less light source. Also, the highlight on this side of the face is not as bright as the one on the opposite side, so I use the dry brush to blend over that. The white chest needs to be adjusted a little bit. There needs to be more fur, white fur, around the neck. So I'm going to add more there. I'm struggling a little bit because of the surface and the buildup of already placed medium, but overall I think it's going to be okay. The last thing I'll do is spray a workable fixative over the top, and that will help it not to smear. I'm pretty satisfied with the drawing, so now it's time for the reveal. Here is the final result of my cat drawing. I have a ritual with each art piece I do after I've finished it. I determine what I could do better next time. I feel there is always room for growth in art. So for next time, I could be more deliberate about where I place my strokes so that issues with placing more strokes don't arise. I can keep an eye out for facial features and see if I have a habit of making them too large. I can make the stripes less messy, and my process could go smoother. The better the outline, the easier it will be to set the strokes down. Now, that's all I have for this How I Draw a Cat video. I hope it helped you in some way. Thanks for stopping by, and until next time, peace.